From the headquarters of Telesur English in Caracas, Venezuela, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Three people have been arrested in Venezuela linked to the attack against President Nicolás Maduro in early August. Communications Minister Jorge Rodríguez identified Henribert Rivas, Ángela Esposita, and a retired coroner as those who led the failed assassination attempt. Rodríguez said authorities continue to search for two others connected to the attack. The government has asked Chile, Colombia, and Mexico to clarify if any embassy workers could be involved.
This attack could have taken us towards a very difficult situation, to serious consequences for the Venezuelan people, to a situation of violence if these criminals would have succeeded in their attack. President Maduro will give the pertinent orders to his foreign minister, Jorge Arreaza, so that these public officials clarify from Chile, Colombia, and Mexico their alleged involvement. There's no diplomatic immunity in case of cover-up of terrorists.
A Chinese ship has arrived in Venezuela to provide medical support. Chinese healthcare experts will provide assistance and will exchange knowledge as well. This is part of the 28 cooperation agreements President Maduro signed with China during his most recent visit. The Peace Ark boat docked in the port of La Guaira.
They will be here for a week, taking care of patients of all nationalities. People have already shown their interest. The governor tells me that over 1,200 Colombians will be helped here.
Venezuela's Minister of Petroleum, Manuel Quevedo, has met with the Secretary General of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, Mohamed Barquindo. Quevedo is in Algeria to attend a meeting of the organization. He says Venezuela wants to strengthen mechanisms to defend oil prices. His government is also aimed at promoting cooperation to guarantee stability in the oil market. This comes days after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened OPEC countries to lower oil prices. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza is urging the Colombian government to assume responsibility for the damage caused by the Colombian drug industry. Arreaza took to Twitter to say that the Colombian state, the world's leading producer of cocaine, puts peace, security, and stability of the region and the world at risk. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Colombia not only increased its coca cultivation last year, but also its capacity to produce it. Brazil's Workers' Party presidential candidate Fernando Haddad continues his campaign in the city of Recife. Recife in Pernambuco, the home state of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, who Haddad is replacing in this presidential run. Along with vice presidential candidate Manuela de Avila, he defended the importance of investing in education. Right-wing candidate in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, said that if he wins the presidency, he will privatize public companies. Bolsonaro also said he will lower the number of ministries. He said on Twitter, quote, "I'm committed to reducing the number of ministries, extinguishing and privatizing a large part of the state companies that exist today. These are unnecessary expenses that should be focusing on the population." Our correspondent Ignacio Lemus tells us more.
A new poll has confirmed Fernando Haddad is second in the polls for the upcoming presidential election. Now he is replacing former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva in the race. Some believe votes are still transferring from one to another. Polls give far-right-wing candidate Jair Bolsonaro the first place with a 28%. Haddad is behind with 16% and center-left candidate Ciro Gomez with 13% of the votes. Candidate Geraldo Alckmin, ally of Michel Temer, has 13% of the votes. In last place is environmentalist and center candidate Marina Silva with 7%. Meanwhile, intellectual Noam Chomsky paid a visit to former President Lula da Silva in Curitiba. Chomsky is one of the most relevant figures of the last century and showed his support to Lula in a key moment in Brazil's democracy.
That was Ignacio Lemus from Sao Paulo. Another social leader has been killed in Colombia. Campesino leader Carmen Elizabeth Tintinago was killed in the municipality of Sotara in the Cauca region. Her name adds up to the list of more than 2,000 social leaders killed since the government and the FARC signed a peace agreement. Social organizations are urging authorities to protect their leaders. 164 have been killed this year alone in Colombia. Our correspondent Jose Manuel Jimenez reports on the latest developments on these cases.
Indeed, the situation for social leaders and human rights defenders is one of permanent danger across the country. We are talking about more than 165 leaders killed in 2018 in different regions such as the department of Meta and Cauca, Mariño, and Antioquia. In this last department in 2018, there have been already 27 assassinated leaders and also 22 leaders who have been forced from their homes. In addition, there are 4,200 people displaced because of the armed groups like the Clan of the Gulf and the Carrapatos, self-defense Gaitanists of Colombia, the Águilas Negras, and also armed groups working for the Mexican cartels seeking to take over land. According to CODES, 38,000 people have been forcibly displaced in 2018, a humanitarian crisis not being addressed by the government. President Iván Duque, in his workshop Building Countries in New York City, discussed the issue and the future of negotiations with the ELN. According to the government, negotiations are frozen until the group meet all conditions laid out by the administration. He also touched on how to combat narco-trafficking through rules and guidance raised by the U.S. government. He discussed the situation in Venezuela and the advance of strategy using policy, economy, and social pressure to remove President Nicolás Maduro. However, he did not make time to talk about the 38,000 displaced people in the country and more than 165 leaders killed during 2018.
Social organizations and human rights defenders in Colombia are also urging authorities to guarantee the lives of journalists. We have more in this report.
The last 2 years has registered the highest number of social leaders killed. Violence is also threatening the lives of journalists around the country.
In September, we received a threat for some investigations we published. It was footage of the paramilitary and information on the false positive case that involves the paramilitary as well as military personnel. This worries us because this case was presented in a court of the special jurisdiction for peace.
According to press freedom organization FLIP, the threats and murders of social leaders have rose. 59 cases of threats were presented in 2015, 90 in 2016, and 129 in 2017.
The same people that are threatening the fight of social leaders are also threatening campesinos, indigenous people, and the youth. They're also preventing people from fighting for their rights and preventing journalists to report on this conflict.
Member of the Commission of Safety Guarantees, Franklin Castañeda, says that even though this new government has promoted different dialogue tables to resolve the situation, no measure has been taken to tackle violence.
There have been spaces of dialogue between civilians and the state. The international community has monitored this dialogue and have asked for measures to protect social leaders and defenders.
Social movements are taking their own measures to protect the lives of leaders and journalists and guarantee their work.
We are promoting self-protection. We are doing this through knowing our territory and promoting the relations with our people. We are guaranteeing our rights.
According to the non-governmental organization, in the past, the presence of armed groups in the country has rose. Paramilitary groups reported to be in Antioquia, Arauca, Atlántico, Bolívar, Boyacá, Caldas, Cauca, Cesar, and Córdoba. Meanwhile, the Pelusos armed group and the National Liberation Army control Santander and the north of Santander.
Our biggest fear is that people from the intelligence services are linked to these groups. We don't understand how certain people are threatened and others are protected. There's no evidence of who is behind these threats.
Journalists, social leaders, and human rights organizations say that the government does not know who these groups are and how they operate. President Duque said he was committed to fight violence. However, until now, the government has not met with civilians, social movements, or human rights organizations.
Coming up, more stories. We'll be back. Peru's Attorney General has opened a new investigation against former President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. He is investigated for alleged vote buying to avoid his impeachment. The Attorney General is accusing Kuczynski and other lawmakers of bribery. The former president said after resigning that accusations of vote buying were, quote, a big lie. Police officers in Peru conducted an inspection of a nightclub in central Lima as part of a nationwide campaign to fight human trafficking. This year, over 1,000 women have been saved from trafficking networks in the country, including 130 foreigners. Authorities launched a campaign focused at recognizing potential aggressors or traffickers. Chile insists it won't negotiate any part of its territory with Bolivia. This comes a week before the International Court of Justice in The Hague decides on Bolivia's demand to gain access to the Pacific. Foreign Minister Roberto Ampuero met with the former foreign ministers to agree on a stand about this dispute. They all agreed Chile will keep the borders that were established in the 1904 treaty. But Bolivia says dialogue is the only option to end the dispute. So we have also confirmation of what the Foreign Minister of Bolivia has said. Of course, Bolivia insists that they must have access to water. We'll come back after a short break. Thanks for joining us again. Thousands of people in Tegucigalpa celebrated the city's 440 years as capital of Honduras. Locals watched the parade of dancers, horses, classic vehicles, and motorcycles as they listened to musical groups for half a kilometer. There were 7 stages set up for performances. Comayagua was the former capital of the Central American nation. A 6-year-old girl has reunited with her family in Honduras months after her father was deported by U.S. immigration officers. Mariana Ponce was separated from her father in June and was taken to a children's shelter. Her parents fear she could be traumatized by the experience. U.S. authorities have separated almost 3,000 children from their parents as they crossed the southern border with Mexico.
Lo que hizo conmigo.
From what he's done with me, I don't like Donald Trump as a person. This separation is hard. It's something ugly that no one deserves. I'm angry, I'm frustrated because he's made me suffer for some 4 months.
And border barriers are a threat not only to humans but also for nature. American bisons or buffaloes are trying to survive in the Mexican state of Chihuahua, right next to the U.S. border, where they used to run free. Experts say the species and forests are threatened due to the fence that divides both countries. Now some farms are aimed at protecting these genetically pure animals who depend on conservation projects to survive in the wild. The Supreme Court of Justice of Trinidad and Tobago has decriminalized homosexual relations. Until Saturday, the practice was banned by the Sex Crimes Act. In April 2018, a judge determined that the sections of the law which penalize the relations between same-sex adults were unconstitutional. The court moved to modify the text of the legislation adhered to in the country since 1986. The Sex Crimes Act is considered a vestige of the British colonial regime in the Caribbean nation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says his country is ready to enhance cooperation with the Caribbean community, the CARICOM. Wang said that both parties share common interests. He added that their cooperation represents a vital part of their ties with Latin America. China will provide these countries with assistance within the framework of the South-South co-participation. For the autumn equinox, China has celebrated the first National Harvest Festival, which recognizes the role of farmers. Farmers make up the majority of the Chinese population, and now there's a special day to recognize their contributions. For the last 5 years, grain output has remained stable at 600 million tons per year. Farmers' income continued to grow since 2012 due to government support for rural development and efforts to reduce poverty. In addition to Beijing, 6 major agricultural lands around the country also staged hundreds of events to mark the festival. China is celebrating its traditional Mid-Autumn Festival with colorful lanterns. The festival is held on the 15th day of the 8th month of the Chinese lunar calendar, coinciding with a bright full moon. This year falls on September 24. In the town of Taiyuan in Shandong province in China, people lit lanterns of different shapes. During the celebrations, people often eat a traditional mooncake, a sign of family unit.
It's our first time celebrating the Mid-Autumn Festival, not with our family at home. But we love it here. We feel as if our entire country flourishes and people are living in peace. It's really beautiful.
Russia's defense ministry has accused Israel of infringing on an agreement between the nations when it conducted an attack on Syria without informing Moscow in advance. The Russian Ilyushin Tu-20 aircraft was downed by Israeli forces, killing 15 Russian soldiers on September 17. The Ministry of Defense said that there was also a civilian passenger flight using that airspace, and therefore a dangerous situation for them could have also been created.
The objective data represented indicate that it was an action by the Israeli combat pilots that led to the death of 15 Russian soldiers. It shows their lack of professionalism or a criminal negligence. Therefore, we believe that the blame for the tragedy of the Russian Tu-20 rests completely on the Israeli Air Force and on those who made such decisions.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has accused the United States of providing financial and military support for anti-government groups in Iran. The armed groups are believed to be behind an attack on a military parade in the city of Abbas, in which 25 people died. Rouhani called the United States a bully who wants to create insecurity in the Islamic Republic.
The small puppet countries that we see in the region are backed by America. The United States is provoking them and giving them necessary capabilities to commit these crimes.
And U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says President Donald Trump is willing to talk to Rouhani. This after the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, dismissed Iran's accusations that the United States and its allies were to blame for the deadly parade attack. Yemen's food crisis will worsen if key port city Hodeidah is damaged. It is facing fresh attacks by the U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition. The port is critical for transporting food, managing 70% of imports. The UN World Programme on Food is making an appeal to protect the crucial infrastructure. Famine levels are on the rise, with 18 million people now facing food shortages. The Yemeni government and a Saudi-led coalition have been launching offensives on the port to try to regain control of the area occupied by Houthi rebels.
Of course, Hodeidah Port is for us as World Food Programme is a vital infrastructure for Yemen and for northern Yemen in particular, where the largest number of people are living. For the World Food Programme, we import about 50% of all of our food, particularly grain, wheat, through Hodeidah. So while we're not sure what will happen in the future, we are appealing to protect infrastructure, critical infrastructure, such as the port, such as the warehouses, such as the cranes, such as the mills.
Political figures are speaking out against the possible demolition of a Palestinian settlement by Israel as a possible war crime. Residents of a West Bank Bedouin community are on the verge of losing their homes. This follows the Israeli government decision to earmark their community for demolition. Legal advocates say Israel's goal is to replace Palestinian communities with Jewish settlements, effectively dividing the West Bank in half and extinguishing hopes for a Palestinian state.
If Israel takes over this place, this will mean that the same thing could repeat in 46 other Bedouin communities in this area.
A historical judo competition for female contestants has been held in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum. Organizers have hailed the competition as a positive step in promoting the rights of women. Participants said such events will help to change certain stereotypes against women in the country. The Kenyan film Rafiki has been broadcasted for the first time in Nairobi in the middle of a controversial censorship. The movie that tells the love story between two women was allowed to be screened after a week from being banned for several months. The LGBTI community celebrated the screening and said it was a step forward towards ending discrimination in Kenya.
I'm so excited that we've been finally allowed to watch it. It's been a year and a half. We filmed last year and we were so excited, really want to watch it. But now, I'm so glad the ban has been lifted, even if it's just for a week. But a week can move into a month, into a year. And even from the crowd that is here, you already see everybody is so excited about watching this movie.
I think it's great that the ban was lifted for the movie to be shown. I think it shows progressiveness, or the fact that we're moving into the right direction.
Che Guevara's resting place in Cuba has become the island's most LGBTI-friendly city. The city of Santa Clara is home to El Menjuje Cultural Center, a place famous for its drag queen shows since 1984. Over the last few decades, the surrounding Villa Clara province has developed into a haven for the LGBTI community. Santa Clara has also been at the forefront of the push to legalize gay marriage, something included in the new draft constitution. And September 23rd marks the Bisexuality Day and the celebrations that come with it. This calls to recognize bisexual communities. This day also focuses on breaking stereotypes and recognizing other valid sexual orientations. Thousands of pensioners have rallied in Spain's capital, Madrid. They call for higher state pensions and demand government action. They want the government to raise retirement pensions in line with inflation. Since 2014, retirement pensions have risen by a 0.25% per year, below inflation.
Pensions should at least be at the cost of life, but right now we're way behind that. The price of electricity is constantly rising, water too, everything. Each time we get less, and then they're not ashamed to raise pensions, just by 1.25%, below inflation, which is €1. Come on, it's enough.
Bands, dance groups, and sports clubs have paraded through the center of Munich, Germany, to begin Oktoberfest. Thousands of people flocked to the opening of the traditional Oktoberfest event for its 185th edition. Around 6 million visitors are expected in Munich before the festival concludes on October 7th. The Mayor Dieter Reiter inaugurated the activities, which will have music, exhibitions, and of course, beer. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all our latest informations, our videos, our opinion articles, divided by country or topic, and be sure to check it out. You can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.